All right.
Venezuela,
Somalia, calm down, bro. Calm down. It was just a question that you obviously can't answer.
Come on.
Are we
The
doing like
reality
wacko?
is
Are we like naming all the
It's
nations?
a fantasy, bro. So this is why I can't answer the question. Can't even answer just a simple hypothetical,
When they
bro.
invaded America with the balloon.
Alright, sorry, I get
I
confused.
like Dylan more and more every time we're on screen together.
Everybody... Fantastic. And let's start backwards from the introduction. Let's start with the Golden Fleet. We got the Golden Fleet going down. We're getting some new battleships, allegedly. He's also talking about doing the Golden Dome and improvement of the Israeli missile system. Do we like these things? What are your thoughts, non-smoker?
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally against it. You know, the president is, I would say, is making unprecedented investments in the military-industrial complex for the benefit of U.S. imperialism, which ultimately benefits the rich and powerful. I don't know about anybody else here, but like I've never been the recipient of even one iota of the spoils of war. For which I have footed the bill for my entire life as a tax-paying American citizen. In that time, I've seen plenty of innocent, mostly brown people massacred for absolutely no fucking reason. And I see no return on that other than wave after wave of refugees and immigrants into the country, which I was told that this president was going to be resolving that issue. Instead, it seems that he's committed to a policy of only compounding it. Somehow conservatives say all of this makes sense. They say that in addition to the fact that President Trump, when he was a candidate Trump ran on a decidedly and consistently an anti-war platform. Yet he goes to war the moment he's in office. Both times, he struck 7 countries in 1 year. And all I hear from the right wing is constant, never-ending cope because they just want to desperately believe that Trump is not fucking them the same way that every other president has in the past. This is the policy of the U.S. deep state. Trump is part of the deep state. He's co-opted by the deep state. It's no surprise to me. It's probably no surprise to anyone on the left. But to right-wingers, I guess they still haven't acknowledged this fact yet. So I'm totally against what they're saying now will be over $1 trillion investment combined into the military in 2027. What a waste of fucking money.
All right, thank you so much, Jason.
When it comes to the idea of the Golden Fleet, it's a great dream. It's a nice pipe dream, honestly. We have the largest open sea navy in the world. It is one of the biggest logistical benefits to the American people, protecting trade routes and things like that. However, I don't believe it'll ever be actualized. I do not fully support the idea of the new battleship plan. Growing up in a naval shipyard community, understanding a little bit about naval architecture, it's going to take about 10 years to get this thing designed properly, and where the Navy will ultimately screw it over because they're going to ask for way too much stuff. And it's going to go well over budget, and it'll just never be actualized. I like the idea of bringing a nice big naval fleet into the process because it does help project American power worldwide, which ultimately helps keep us safe. But I just don't see it being actualized.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Vark.
Yeah, actually, I'm gonna have to piggyback on Jason here. I don't actually see this actually happening anytime soon. I like the idea, however. I think it's something around what, $175 billion just for the Golden Dome alone. It's kind of a ridiculous amount of money to kind of spend on. However, if it does go into fruition and actually does happen, it's probably one of the best deterrents we'll ever have against foreign enemies, etc. And I get the idea of that, especially if we can detect satellites of other nations, etc. Like, this is a really good idea for self-defense. However, I just don't really see it coming to fruition anytime soon. What are you looking at, non-smoker?
Self-defense. Got it. Just want to make sure I heard that clearly.
Well, I mean, deterrence, just like the wall that you were talking about earlier, the illegal immigrants.
Exactly,
wall.
sure.
9/11.
Yeah, go ahead, Greg, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm actually kind of ambivalent on Golden Dome or Golden Fleet. I assume that this was a versus one or the other. while I certainly believe that the only real threat to America in the entire world right now is suicide bombers and the occasional missile attack. The fact that hypersonic missiles are becoming a thing, the technology exists, they're going to be perfected, and once that changes the dynamic, so I could see where the Golden Dome would be a worthwhile investment. However, you know, there's something to be said to have a Navy and a modern Navy and a more modern Navy. So I remain unconvinced. I can't wait to hear everybody else's arguments on which is better and why it's better and all of that. The fact that the idea that we're not going to do anything is retarded is absolutely completely stupid. We're going to spend money on defense budgets because that's what America does. So the question is, which one do you want and why? There we go.
All right. Thank you so much. And Mr. Burns.
Sure. So yesterday, Trump put out a truth post. I still don't know what we're supposed to call them. Truths, I assume.
Yeah, it sounds about right.
About right. A little Orwellian, but about right. 1.5 trillion is the number he wants for the military budget year over year, which would be a 50% increase over our current military budget. And he says he's being able to gather the revenue for this by tariffs. The tariffs that are still being determined whether or not they will be legal in the court system and whether or not the tariff revenue we've already taken will have to be given back. So just to be clear, a lot of the funding that this expansion is supposed to be based in, we still don't know if it is even particularly legal, as the power of the purse, the power of tax goes with Congress. And these tariffs were one of the largest tax increases on American consumers and American businesses in American history. So where this money is going to come from is the question I do have to ask, if $500 billion is coming from revenue we don't even know is guaranteed. Putting that aside, I think the Golden Dome is a bad idea. I'm not against investing in sensor systems. I'm not against investing in radar systems. I'm not against investing in systems that will help us deal with an accidental launch or a rogue state with a few atomic weapons attacking the United States. This has been the standard in American defense policy for years, and it makes sense because the goal of trying to stop a Chinese or Russian full-scale assault is an impossible goal that is not within our budgetary capabilities. And it would mean taking basically the majority of our budget and dedicating it towards air defense systems. Investing in decoys makes sense. Investing in radar systems makes sense even if we don't have a full-scale attack. But the easiest way to deter an atomic attack on the United States is to further expand or maintain a large-scale atomic arsenal. It is much cheaper to penetrate one missile with 12 warheads that will then crash down upon the enemy than it is to have 12 interceptors that every single one is supposed to have either a 100% success rate, or we're going to have 2 or 3 or 4 interceptors, not for each missile, but for each detached warhead that will come from the missile. Now, we can try to take them out in the boost phase, but I mean, even trying to take out North Korean missiles in the boost phase is difficult. If we're talking about liquid gas, liquid fuel, liquid, propellant, that's 280 seconds in North Korea that you have until you take it out in the boost phase. They've moved that to hard fuel. Now it's 180 seconds you have to take it out in the boost phase. So I just want somebody to lay out to me how $175 billion is more useful here than taking that money and putting it towards any other of our defense priorities. That's more than the entirety of the aid that we have given to Ukraine. And I am not sure that it could actually achieve defending the United States against what it's meant to. And if you read the declarations, they say defend against peer competitors, not rogue states, not, a random accidental launch. Those are already covered. Peer-to-peer competitors. I don't think that's possible. As for the Golden Fleet, I think that makes more sense. But I think the problem with the Trump administration is they're going to have to work with the Europeans a lot to achieve that, because the Europeans are the best ship manufacturers in the world.
All right, well, let's get into it. I guess a good place to start was where y'all were fighting is the Golden Dome a self-defense option, or is it an offensive kind of weapon here? It looks like Consor, you took some umbrage with the decision to call it a self-defense.
I mean, yeah, okay, what? So the Golden Dome, first of all, let's call it what it is. I mean, is there a ballistic missile threat that the United States of America faces? Well, I suppose if they engage in brinksmanship with countries that have ballistic missile capabilities, then yes, there is a ballistic missile threat, right? If we deploy our military all over the fucking world to intimidate these other countries, then we face a possible ballistic missile threat. But ignoring that, I mean, do you guys really I almost want to jump back into the Golden Fleet thing real quick, but you guys know, like, when they announce these hundreds of billions of dollars in, military spending, future military spending, that's given in the form of weapons contracts, right? So there's all this public money flowing into, for example, Palantir, right? Palantir is receiving I think it was like $448 million to implement Ship OS, which would help, design, I guess it would be used to help the supply chain of shipbuilding. Palantir is going to get that money whether or not the Golden Fleet is ever built and whether or not the Golden Fleet even benefits Americans. It's just fucking cronyism and kickbacks. How can conservatives who are small government, they don't like government spending, they want to reduce taxes, all of that stuff, how can you fucking justify this?
Well, I guess I'll take this. It's quite easy. We've got an aging U.S. Navy fleet. We're currently running around 436 ships in total inventory. That's including our mothballed, where we're able to field only around 300 warships at any time, and that's to include if we take the ships being upgraded out of the shipyards and things like that. We do need to up the size of our fleets. Unfortunately, if I had it my way, we wouldn't be patrolling all of the shipping lanes all over the world. I think we waste too much time defending other people's trade routes and not really worrying much about what's going on around the oceans around our nation. One of the interesting things about the idea of the proposal of the Golden Fleet is they want to build around 134 autonomous unmanned ships. I'm unconvinced of the technology and being able to operate as they want it to right now. So I'm a little iffy on that. When we look at the shipbuilding capability of America today, we have a severe lack in tradesmen to be able to do it. The supply side, yeah, it's a little difficult, but the actual pitfall that we're falling into right now is we don't have the people to build these ships. I fully support the idea of increasing our fleet size. That way we can more easily project our power across seas if needed, because I'd rather engage over in their neighborhood than in our own. But beyond that, I like the idea. I just don't think it'll be actualized, and I don't believe Congress will allow it to go through.
Well, before you go on, just let me ask you this: you just said we don't have the fleet building capabilities. Wouldn't the getting the contracts to build them also include potentially building other facilities to build the fleet? Isn't that like a double-edged or double whammy? It's like a 2-for-1.
So it's really not the facilities that we're lacking, though. It is the skilled tradesmen in order to build these ships. These are multi-year projects. Currently, to build an Arleigh Burke destroyer, it takes about 5.5 years on what should be in a 2.5 to possibly 3-year maximum time to build these ships, because we just simply don't have enough hands to do the work. Okay, we have the new development of the new frigate system that's going to be based off the Freedom-class Coast Guard cutter. It is going to be substantially less capable than the previous frigate that was just tossed because the U.S. Navy decided they wanted to cram a bunch of shit on it. The Navy suffers from putting too much equipment on their designs.
I think that's the actual problem.
More capable.
So and not that I pay a ton of attention to shipbuilding. It's not, airplane building I pay a lot of attention to. Yeah. Ships not so much. However, I don't think it's that we lack the skilled tradesmen. I don't think that's true at all. I think what we actually lack is a cutoff where we stop adding things. What you just said is actually brilliant. The problem is that while the ships are being built, they're making constant changes. It's like the house that never gets finished, right? I don't know if any of you guys have worked contract jobs before, or, construction. Every fucking change order is not a 2-hour deal. Every change order is especially on a fucking ship, is like 3, 4, 5 months added, which then now it's a year, and now it's 5 years to build a 3-year ship, and then by the time and part of the problem is that for whatever reason, the Navy has, and I'm going a little bit of the weeds here, but the Navy has determined to not be as upgradable as it could be. So a lot of their systems are very proprietary, and you can't just pull out one widget and slide the newest version of the widget in. So you have to have a whole new setup to run what it is. And so, you know, so when you come through, when you're 3 years in and now we have a brand new radar system and say, okay, we want to put this radar system in. Well, now that's a complete re-engineer of certain areas of the boat that has to be maybe done and undone. I think that our shipbuilding is, I don't think that we lack skilled help. I think that we lack the determination to get them done in a hurry, and we just simply always want the absolute best. So I reject the idea. And the reason I do that is because this country built Liberty ships in like volume, right? And so I mean, I absolutely reject that. I think that's dumb. I think that's a bad argument.
And so the reason why I say that is because I have people who currently work at places like Huntington Ingalls Shipbuilding in Pascagoula, Mississippi. And
I know some guys in Oregon right now.
A third of their workforce happens to be Filipino contractors and things like that they have to ship in just to have hands out there to do the work. And of course, since they're foreign nationals, there's certain compartments they can't work in because they don't have the classified clearance.
And that's the other problem. Even if you had enough skilled welders and electronics guys and all of this, even if you had enough, they may not be able to have the top secret security clearance or very secret or whatever. There's a clearance for fucking everything, and you may be allowed in this part of the boat, but you can't cross this line into this part of the boat.
Sounds like inefficient big government.
Well, you brought up the tech issue with the autonomous ships. Like in Ukraine, we've seen the autonomous ships be pretty effective with the drones and whatnot. Why wouldn't we be able to just take that?
Well, so those aren't autonomous. Those are remote controlled drones that are being operated, and that's essentially what they're wanting to do. That's essentially what's happening right now on a modern battlefield. However, the U.S. Navy wants autonomous ships. They want AI-driven ships that will perform certain missions without personnel input. And so there's a distinct difference there between autonomous versus drones.
This is another area where I want to emphasize European cooperation. Not only are European ship manufacturers some of the best in the world, but also Europe is the first continent to really feel the full blunt of interstate drone warfare and the use of drones to target with this much success other naval ships. I mean, there has been attempts by the Houthis in Yemen with very little success. There has been attempts by other powers, but the Ukrainians have been the most effective in disabling 40 to 50% of the Black Sea Fleet using their naval drones. And this actually brings us back to the Golden Dome, because here's a question. Let's say we actually spent the amount of money that would be necessary to find a real effective Golden Dome, and we got the Canadians on board, which would be necessary and we got them to foot their part of the bill, and we got Greenland involved, and we did everything that was necessary. What happens when the Russians load an atomic device onto a naval drone and slide that into a major American port anyway, avoiding the entire system? There's so many other ways that an atomic device can be delivered to a civilian population. It's not even just about protecting major urban areas. They'll just pick the next major location. You protect 33 cities? Well, okay, they'll pick the 34th, the 35th, the 36th.
Sure.
It's a very difficult job.
Yeah, fair enough. I remain unconvinced, because the reality is that I'm actually not concerned about nukes. I'm concerned about hypersonic missiles with conventional warheads blowing up Kansas. I mean that's the reality of it, right? So right now, the state of warfare is very even. Like we are the top, and everybody else gets pissed on by us, and that's the end of it. But China, Russia, and a couple other countries are very, very close to hypersonic missiles, and hypersonic is a very special threat. Because the distance they can travel, as fast as they can travel it, changes what we think of as missile warfare. It just does. And so that's where I think the only merit for a Golden Dome to me, regardless of what that actually looks like, is the idea of the hypersonic cruise missiles that can leave Minsk and be here in 3 hours before we even know that it left, right? Like
Well,
we can't track it that fast.
Well, the
okay,
Russians
so-
and the Iranians have hypersonic missiles.
They say they have them.
Right.
They're not perfect.
Yep.
They're close.
They claim them to be hypersonic, but they're hypersonic in the boost phase, not in the terminal phase, and that's what actually determines a hypersonic missile. Here's the nice thing about the Golden Dome. The Golden Dome proposal is using existing technology that exists. It incorporates Aegis on land, which we have 2 sites currently, one in Alaska and another one that we operate out of Poland. It's a very good, stable system. The AN Spy 7 radar is amazing. But when you look at air defense deal, where Dylan is actually 100% correct is the accuracy of the interceptors and how many interceptors are going to have to be launched to stop one warhead versus, if you have a multiple MIRV type ballistic missile launching 12 or 24 warheads, how many missiles does it take to actually take out that warhead? It's actually a great point. I don't believe, and yes, without Canadian cooperation, which they're kind of fighting against, even though the only reason why they don't have an actual military is because Uncle Sugar provides their security for them.
Yeah, it's not like they have a choice.
Yeah, it's
Well, y'all are talking about.
Wait. Can I hear this all the time about Canada, but Canada has all of the same geographic advantages of the United States. And who would invade Canada in North America? I mean, we've never come to Canada's defense. Canada came to our defense after 9/11. They lost guys in Afghanistan.
They did, and I've served with Canadian soldiers abroad and here in the United States during Operation Noble Eagle. Following the 9/11 deal, I dealt with NATO people. The threat to Canada would be the same threat that America has. If you want to actually come over and invade America, you're not going to do it through the West Coast. You're not going to do it through the East Coast. Really, your best bet would be coming through the North Flat Plains from the north or the south. So Mexico and Canada actually should be strategic partners in defense of America, because it also helps them as well, because they are the most likely vector of initial invasion.
If one of the things
So to be clear, you're saying that Canada's a threat as a passageway to invade us. They're like our Belgium. They're like Norway.
Kind of.
Well, he didn't say threat in a way, but
if somebody launches a hypersonic missile over the poles, so there's a couple of things. First of all, hypersonic missiles do not fly in a parabola like conventional missiles do. They can actually vary their trajectory, and it doesn't really cost them speed like it does a conventional missile. And so they can go through Canada's air defenses, and they may, because they're not particularly accurate currently, they could hit Canada. So I would think Canada would want the additional protection, but even if they didn't, it doesn't matter, because we don't, we provide all of their protection anyway. I mean, that's the way it is.
Well, I want to go back to something that Dylan said here, and I want to go to Jake actually, because I've sat here and argued with Jake several times about the benefits of backing Israel, mainly from just like a military weapons testing standpoint stance, right? And I feel like with Israel, they might not have as much experience with drones as say Ukraine does, because I feel like their enemies are a little bit, Russia's a little bit more of a different, more powerful enemy than, I don't know, a bunch of terrorist works. But they seem to have had a lot of experience with drones. Like, what, do you not like this idea that we're taking from another country and we're putting that in here, and it should be able to cover the drone defense as well as like the missile defense? Like, we're taking real world experience from the Israelis and applying it to America on a larger scale.
Yeah, it is a larger. No, I understand that, but you have to realize that the Israelis have a much smaller plot of land in order to protect that Iron Dome. So obviously, it's much easier to protect that compared to the United States. Not only that, the United States does have to provide protection even to Canada, especially because we have Alaska there, etc. So we do need the help. Going back to Dylan's point here,
to some degree, Mexico.
And some degree Mexico too, as well. So there is a lot more. There's a lot more nuance than just with Israel, where they're just surrounded purely by their enemies, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the big main core there. However, Israel has mastered that Iron Dome. I think they've done a very good job on it, but it's not nearly to the same scale of the land that we have to protect here in the United States. But I am for that. And again, hypothetically, I think this is a great idea. I want to ask non-smoker here. Hypothetically, if we're able to actually fund this and actually do it without very minimum consequences, would you be 100% okay with that theoretically?
I'm sorry. Ask me again. What if hypothetically, if we were able to fund it with no consequences?
With minimal consequences.
What do you
Yeah, like
mean
they did war bonds
Yeah.
or some shit.
Yeah. In other words, like we were able to fund it with the help of our European allies, Canada, etc., and we were able to actually get it done. Would you still have an issue with it?
Dude, it's not necessary. I mean, all of the things you guys are outlining, like this is all fantasy land shit. Like, what if?
So, yeah, but
what
okay,
if
I know it's
America?
fantasy.
What if
Hold on, that's not my
America? Well,
question,
do you
though.
want me to answer the question or not?
But I know it's fantasy, bro.
No,
I'm
then
asking you.
Okay, then you want to ramble.
Yeah, let me-
What's the actual problem that you would have if this was actually
The actual
in
problem I have
self-defense?
is that
Yes.
this is a fucking perverted fantasy that you guys have because you're
Yeah,
all
that's not,
military.
bro. I already
worshipping
told you
freaks.
hypothetically,
you think
bro.
that, you guys think that ballistic
Don't spurg out, dude.
missiles
Just answer
are
the
gonna
question
be
normal.
raining down on America
Oh,
any
God.
day now. It's not fucking happening unless we keep escalating all over the world. Why don't we stop doing that?
Because crazy people don't need a fucking reason.
Yeah, exactly, bro.
Dude, we're
This
the
is a
crazy
ridiculous
person.
point.
He's
We're
the man
crazy
right next to you. Look,
We're
that
attacking
dude that looks
sovereign
like Jesus
countries.
there has been in a fucking war zone. Right?
Yeah, actually, let's bring that up. Let's go back to Dylan here. I think it's actually interesting.
Like, don't say that people don't wage war just for the fuck of it.
Yeah, that's a stupid fucking argument.
Who
I
was
just-
more aggressive in the last 2 decades, Russia or the United States?
I guess it could vary.
Concerning their capacity, I mean, it depends on. Like, do you think of the Russian? Well, here's a question, Osmoker. Do you
No,
think if the
not
Russians had
concerning
our
their
power,
capacity.
do you
Who's
think if
been
the
more
Russians had our
aggressive?
wealth and power,
Who's
do you
been
think
more
they'd be
aggressive? America's
or
been
less
involved in every war in the world in the last 2
aggressive?
decades.
We don't want to.
Plus.
Whatever.
I guess it was you're asking.
It was bad when the lefties say like whatever to the other lefties.
They say the Russians.
Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya,
Talk about Muslims, they're gonna say the
Ukraine,
All right.
Venezuela,
Come on, Smoker.
Somalia.
Calm down, bro. Calm down. It was just a
Syria.
question that you obviously can't answer.
Come
Go
on,
ahead.
Are we
the
doing like
reality
wacko? Are we
is
like
we
naming all
keep
the
doing
nations?
more.
Fantasy, bro. So this is why you can't answer the question. You can't even answer just a simple hypothetical,
They
bro.
invaded America with the balloon.
All right, sorry. I had to get
I
control.
like Dylan more and more every time we're on screen together.
Everybody was talking, and I want to reframe it. Nobody can hear nothing. All right, I'm gonna mute everybody. Sorry, guys. We had to get control of it. I guess I do want to go back to Dylan. I think this is actually an interesting question that Non-Smoker is bringing up. He brought it up earlier when it was open about it being the self-defense system not being a self-defense system. And then Dylan brought up in his that they've been very effective in Ukraine about stopping the drones. I don't remember the exact numbers. I'm sure you can quote them again in a second. But I want to
They disabled like 40 to 50% of the Russian Black Sea fleet.
Yeah, and in your documentary, they're using fucking shotguns. So I don't know. Like at some level, is it even worth it if they're using shotguns in Ukraine to disable? What are your thoughts here? Go ahead, Dylan.
Is it worth it to what? Is it worth it? I'm sorry.
Build the Golden Dome. Build the Golden Dome if Ukraine's being this effective with shotties. Like
I mean, well, the shotties are being used to shoot down drones. The Golden Dome would be used to shoot down a whole myriad of like short range to intermediate range to long range missiles. Supposedly, at least that's the point, is to deter a type of attack. It's never to actually have an attack happen, but it's to make an opponent think, I don't even know which launchers actually have interceptors. I don't know which even launchers even have atomic weapons. There's so many decoys I don't even know are decoys that it's not worth it to engage in the attack in the first place. That should be the purpose of the Iron Dome system, not to actually create a 100% success rate of shooting down nukes, which is not only economically unfeasible, but if we were to do that, if you're China, if you're Russia, what do? You immediately create more nukes. You immediately create more warheads. You immediately increase the size so you can swarm our systems and overwhelm it. You can have the best goalie in the world or the best like man in the world guarding this spot, and you'd stop 1 shot, 2 shot, but if you throw 20 shots at them at the same time, you're fucked.
Yeah, it's easy to overwhelm these systems. And that's one thing that the new drone warfare that we're seeing going on in Ukraine is actually showing is swarm attacks they're impossible to stop. The reason why they're employing something as archaic as a shotgun is because a person can carry that and engage in these small FPV drones with some relative, I guess, ease is the word you would have to use, using birdshot, because these drones are kind of fragile, they're lightweight, things like that. But the reason why something like a ballistic missile protection system, it should have been something that the U.S. should have had already. The technology wasn't
Star Wars.
there. Yes, the Star Wars. The Star Wars was a wonderful feat.
Star Wars had that? They had a Golden Dome?
No, we have a Star Wars program. You don't remember this?
Yeah, that's what
Oh,
what
the state-
made the Soviet Union.
Railguns.
Well,
I mean, we could have a Golden Dome, not with just missiles, but the railguns that are still up there in space. They're still up there. We didn't bring them down. Like, they're still up there.
What's actually more interesting is the new laser missile defense system.
I heard about the laser stuff. I mean, yeah.
That shit's real. I actually thought that was a fucking lie, but I know
I thought
people.
it was a lie too, bro. I was gonna say that sounds like fucking Dr. Evil.
I know people
on
who
the
blow
moon.
shit up, and they have confirmed by not denying that shit exists.
Yeah,
it works.
Can I pose a question to Jason real quick? Just
Sure, go ahead.
in light of what you just said, because it sounds like you know a lot about this stuff, and I respect your
my profession,
expertise. Right. So let me ask you this. So there was a book written in 2021 by Henry Kissinger and several other people, Eric Schmidt and another computer science guy. I can't remember. It's called The Age of AI. And this was before AI reached the level of sophistication that we're seeing now, right? Which is only going to increase, right, over time. We're seeing AI implemented on the battlefield in Ukraine. I encourage everybody in the audience, if you haven't read it, there's an extremely long piece in the New York Times about AI drones in Ukraine, how successful they've been in repelling Russian attacks. They go into the cluster drone attacks, stuff like that, and reading that article to me is rather frightening, because although it's encouraging from a Ukrainian perspective that they've been able to so impressively defend themselves utilizing this amazing technology, there's a heavy implication in reading it that, like, hey, this is the new frontier for warfare, like AI-enabled cluster drone strikes that can't be stopped, and in this book, The Age of AI, they go into AI being basically like the future of warfare and presenting in many ways this mutually assured destruction scenario, much like we saw with nuclear weapons. So given that, right, given that argument that this could evolve to a point where, like, as you're sort of implying, I think, hey, there may be no way to deter attacks like this. Shouldn't we then stop talking about militarism and start talking about diplomacy and scaling back our militaries, right? I mean, I'm not against practical measures of defense, but this whole over $1 trillion investment in military spending the Trump administration is talking about in 2027, very, very aggressive foreign policy stance in general, whatever happened in Venezuela, whatever you think, there's many examples, I would say, of the U.S. approaching the world in a more aggressive manner. I don't know. I mean, am I crazy here to say, like, hey, in light of this very scary new technology, maybe we should start scaling back the militarism and instead take a more diplomatic approach?
I think that's a good question. That's actually a very good point.
It's actually a decent idea, and I'll basically say it like this: is the best defense is a strong offense. Nothing deters anyone more than I'll shoot you in the fucking face. That's just how the world works. I would rather have a strong military. Now, I believe that we have focused throughout the past several decades a little bit too offensively. Okay, I was a vocal opponent of our staying in Afghanistan for as long as we did, for staying in Iraq as long as we are, for staying in Syria for as long as we are. I think the fact that the United States military has basically been mercenaried out in order to defend corporate interest abroad, I think is disgusting. As someone who participated in a lot of those campaigns, I'm not happy. The initial invasion of Afghanistan was righteous, but once we knew Osama bin Laden was out of the country, a month into that campaign, we should have left. When it came to Iraq, we basically told a half truth. We said, oh, we know they have weapons of mass destruction. What they didn't tell you is that we sold those weapons of mass destruction to them in the form of chemical weapons, biological weapons, things like that. We did find those, and some Marines were exposed to some nerve agents while in Fallujah. So, I mean, it was proven, but it just wasn't up to the quality that they were claiming, because these weapons degrade over time, things like that. And they also still had the U.S. property U.S. Army stenciled on the side of some of these canisters and everything. So I hear what you're saying, non-smoker, right? And I understand your thought process with it, and I kind of share it to a point. But I am also a man who has worked in the profession of arms my entire adult life, and I understand that one of the things that actually helps keep Americans safe is the fact that we will rain holy hell down on anyone if you fuck with us right. And that's just it's just historically accurate. It's what works.
Hey, I have a question for Jason really quick, but before that, non-smoker, are you insinuating that you would believe that the future of modern warfare, at least in the United States with Russia, et cetera, would be AI-driven warfare? And that we should invest our money into technologies such as AI rather than more so of the actual physical defense?
I listen, I'm not an expert, obviously, okay. But from what I understand, yeah, that sort of is the future.
That's probably where it's yeah. Okay. Jason, do you agree with that statement?
Well, I mean, look, we have organizations like DARPA and stuff that is working on things like that. And I'm not privy to everything that's in the works, but we do be building shit. And sure. That's just what America does. We consistently work on trying to revolutionize the battle space and things like that, trying to save American lives. It doesn't always work. Okay. I mean, the reality is a lot of R&D projects end up getting scrapped because they run over budget. They don't even come close to meeting the capabilities that are initially pushed out there. Things like that. That is just the nature of R&D. Plain and simple. We've got entire museums dedicated to nothing but failures in military technologies. However, we also have a lot of technologies, including medical technologies, that have benefited from these type of projects throughout the time. Think about it. And if you got a simple staph infection in the 1800s, they had to cut your arm off. Today, we actually have means to actually help mend that. Stuff like that. That is done through military research. Hate to break it to you. The vast majority of medical advancements come through military research, things sure. like that. So there's more than just defense benefits that comes through these programs.
Let me ask this though. So I posted an article just now, and there's been a few. This is the article that I'm going to quote, but go ahead. In 1 second. I find it interesting because non-smoker has been kind of saying that we're being the aggressors and all these things, and this is causing these countries to be hostile. And
yeah, we're the bad guys.
I don't know that, and I'm not totally opposed to actually being the bad guy if they'll ever heard me take any of my stances. But when I'm sitting here hearing this, I go, well, wait a minute. There's a report out now that in 2019 they basically said you can have Venezuela, we're going to take Ukraine. That's what Russia told I guess a Trump admin team, right? And I don't think that worked out. But now it's like Trump, by being aggressive, has weakened BRICS overall. Like Russia's in a forever war. I know that's not good for Ukraine, but it's hurting Russia. China maybe is getting better with them, but North Korea's doing all right. But Iran's the weakest have been. Venezuela's gone. Cuba's on the rocks. Like these seem like it's Iran's in shambles. It seems like it's taking care of these one at a time, right? And you're knocking out this like alliance that Russia had. That seems like kind of the point of this Golden Fleet is like, hey, we can show up at any time, and not only do you have aircraft carriers, we'll have all this other shit too. Like, do y'all not see this as a geopolitical tool to use by having such a powerful military?
I kind of disagree. I kind of disagree with your analysis, and because my reason behind it is honestly what we're seeing in Venezuela. What we saw happen in Venezuela, I think directly, if you really want to know the truth behind it, it's trying to protect the petrodollar. America itself.
That's the whole point. That's literally
you know what?
Yeah.
We don't have to be the world's hegemon currency. We really don't. I see a whole lot of stuff that we've engaged in more in protection of this antiquated world order that was developed following World War II to protect the petrodollar. That is what has allowed America to strive economically and everything else. And yes, it was definitely a golden age of America, but I think honestly we should look at new tactics in order to help push our power through more soft and look, some less squishy means too, a little bit less diplomatic, speak softly, carry big stick, those kind of ideals. And that's something that like the Golden Fleet would actually help tie in.
Bill, you were going to say something. I know Greg wants to say something too.
Yeah, so I think one thing, maybe the disconnect here, and maybe, just because we just have different opinions on this. Maybe part of the disconnect is that the Golden Dome would be a defensive measure. It wouldn't be it wouldn't matter. For example, a non-smoker, if we had the Golden Dome, because we don't threaten other people with it, right? They just couldn't threaten us because we'd be like, fuck you. We're hiding behind our shield.
As I say, we're a threat all the time. If we go put missile defenses in, say, like Poland, they're going to flip out. Like, they're going to say that's an offensive tactic to, like, hit them in.
I can't hear you because your mic sucks. And so you're going to have to start over.
I'm saying
Nobody told
they
him till
say
an hour in.
that's what Russia. Yeah, I know, right? That's what Russia says. Like, whenever we go in there, right, and we put missile defense systems in Poland, they're going to freak out. Or like we do in Turkey, they're going to be like, no, you're boxing us in. That's aggressive.
But we're not talking about putting a Golden Dome in Poland. We're talking about doing it for the United States. That's a defensive array. But the fleet, the Golden Fleet or Iron Fleet or whatever we're going to call it, the fleet would be a mostly offensive weapon. Right, that like you don't use battleships to defend things very often. You go and blow shit up.
You don't really use battleships anymore, period.
Yeah, battleships are the aircraft carrier made the battleship concept obsolete. Honestly, the idea of the Trump
and actually, I'm sorry,
Trump-class battleship it's more of a missile truck. It's more of an ammo truck than it is a traditional battleship by thoughts of naval.
Yeah, it's the ammo cart. Hey,
A VLS carrier.
So the reality is that we're not even talking necessarily about increasing our big stick of lethality throughout the world by doing these measures, because we already have the most lethal Air Force on the planet. Matter of fact, I think we have the top 4.
Well, we have the top 2. That's with the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Navy's Air Forces. The U.S. Army's air capabilities are only rotary wing. So, I mean, in that category, yes, we do control the top rank there. But if you want to look at it as an Air Force combined, we do have the top 2 Air Forces overall. They really wouldn't count the Army as one. Just saying. And the Marine Corps are the Navy.
I think it still has more aircraft than most other countries.
Yes, the Army has more aircraft than the Air Force, and more boats than the Navy.
I'm just saying, but
W chat.
It's very interesting because we went immediately to, or at least non-smoker went immediately to the offensive. Like, hey, we're going to scare the rest of the world because we put in these defensive measures.
No,
I remain unconvinced of this. I don't believe it.
No, he called it a fantasy. Like,
no, you're misunderstanding. For Christ's sake.
Okay.
You're misunderstanding.
Okay.
We're investing in a missile defense system because we've already scared the shit out of the rest of the world. I mean, that's been sort of
obviously not enough.
The culmination of our no. In fact, that's why you see other powers escalating is in response to what we do. I mean, it's like you guys, it's like you were asleep for the 1990s and the early 2000s or something like that, when American hegemony reigned supreme and we acted with impunity wherever the fuck we wanted in the world. It's almost like the Russians and the Chinese and the North Koreans and the Iranians are responding to that. And that's why we need to build a missile defense system, is because now there's a renewed threat that's the result of our actions.
So we should have just shared the power and just gave out all the missiles here. Everybody's equal.
This is listen. What did they do? What did they do in the Cold War?
What countries has that worked for?
What did they do in the Cold War? What did they do in the Cold War? Dylan, I'm talking about America. Okay, what did they do in the Cold War in response to escalating threat scenarios? They sat down with the Soviets and established diplomacy. Okay, they established diplomacy because it became clear that if the two sides ever engaged in an all-out war, it would be fucking apocalyptic, and they wanted to avoid that. So the approach to foreign policy up until the collapse of the Soviet Union was to, with careful consideration that we can't 100%.
Wasn't that because of mutually assured destruction?
Yeah,
well, but the Cold War
had to have weapons, right?
But the Cold War was a multi-pronged thing where not only did we engage in diplomacy with the Soviet Union, we also did a lot of military research, R&D.
Yeah, we can do both.
Systems.
We can do both.
We can do both. We can do
but
both.
we're not doing the
thing that we stopped being.
Why are you saying we're not doing the diplomacy part?
I would say we're not doing sufficient diplomacy.
Well, that's a
Okay,
completely
there's
different
diplomacy.
argument.
There's
I didn't
difference
talk
right
about
there.
that argument. I'm
Yeah,
talking
okay,
about this
fine.
argument.
Okay, fine. If I need to be precise, I should have been precise. My apologies. I don't think we're taking sufficient diplomatic measures with any of our great rivals. You have a fucking president who starts a trade war with China, right? Backs off of it, is doing the whole madman diplomacy thing. Same
by the
thing
way,
with
that's
Russia
working.
and Ukraine, by the way, back and forth with Russia, Ukraine, playing them off of each other. The guy wants a Nobel Peace Prize. That's why he's trying to get these expedient solutions, and then randomly does things out of nowhere. It's almost like he's a fucking idiot, right? And that's a huge problem.
Except China's
fucking idiot
economy
in
is
power.
getting fucked over right now. So I mean, that's
China's economy is getting fucked over.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Smoker. Okay,
Yeah, hold on.
For 15 years, China's on the edge of collapse.
Literally, my wife got back from there on Thursday or Tuesday, and in Beijing, they're moving out of Beijing down to Shanghai because the economy is so bad. What do you? I mean, you talk like you know stuff, but you're just making an assumption.
Dude, you're saying that China's economy is collapsing, and your evidence is that
I didn't say it's collapsing. I said Trump's measures are working.
Listen, I'm being nice. You know that whole last panel you called Venezuela? All right?
I did.
I wouldn't talk about people not knowing anything, okay?
Yeah, when I do shit on purpose, I'll claim it.
Venezuela.
And I did.
Let me.
I still do it.
All right, let's go. Let's get back here. I saw Dylan. I know you wanted to get in, so yeah, go ahead, Dylan. Go ahead.
Sure, I've had a few things I want to say, but I want to first respond to non-smokers. I think shock at his colleagues. I sympathize with non-smoker here, right? I'm not going to put no hammer and sickle over my shoulder. So we come from different perspectives. But my sympathy is, I imagine for the last 25 years, he's had to argue with a class of neoconservatives and other right-wing thinkers who argued that what we were bringing to the Middle East, even if self-interested, would bring good things to them, could bring democracy to them, could bring reform to them, could help build up their societies. And now when we're talking about Venezuela, all of the pretense has been ignored. Donald Trump is saying we're running the country, we're taking the oil, it's for the oil, he's being very open about it, and it's Marco Rubio who has to come in afterwards and polish up the scene. So I do think there is an adjustment that's being made of accepting the fact that we're no longer having Condoleezza Rice or George Bush style talks about democratization of these states. We're blatantly talking about going in and gaining control of their natural resources and using their disadvantaged position to enrich ourselves, whether that be with the Ukrainians in between the Russians right now to take their resources, or whether that be the Venezuelans and the fact that we basically want soldiers directly guarding the oil fields because they went from 3 million productions to 1.1 million barrels of production, and that 1.1 barrels is not going to us, they're going to our adversaries. That's why we got involved. And so to see that shift and to just take it at face value, it happened, and there's no wait a second, so we're acting as empire when we talk about taking over Greenland, ignoring the locals of these people. We just accept that at face value. There's no self-reflection, something that's been learned in the last 80 years. I mean, we had so many advertisements of crying Native Americans and how sad, don't litter and don't do this to the Native American peoples. And now all of a sudden we'll go and conquer another Native people with no self-reflection. So it's really hard for a lot of people on the left to see this type of behavior from the United States, to see it accepted by a conservative movement that's talked so much about sovereignty and is willing to tread on the sovereignty of other states. And that area, I sympathize with non-smoker. And the area that I don't is I think if the United States was gone, Russia would invade Ukraine all the same. I think if the United States was gone, China would invade Taiwan all the same. I don't think the presence of the United States would change how these states behave, because Russia has always behaved like that, because that's how the Russians behave. As for what we should actually do with our defense budget, we need to choose our objectives. And I think we need to choose them wisely. I think that $150 billion dedicated towards an ally like the Ukrainians that goes towards directly decomposing Russian defense capacity is a lot more useful than $175 billion dedicated towards something that is not achievable.
See, I actually like some of the things you said there, Dylan, and I agree with you to a point. Now, where I would differ, of course, is that $150 billion that we're investing in Ukraine. I like better the idea of taking $150 billion and investing it in the United States, doing things like building up our infrastructure, our sensor capability around our borders and things like that. Because where we've spent a lot of our time during the 90s and 2000s, worried about the sovereignty of other nations, we've completely neglected our own.
Mark, you said earlier that you want to fight them over there, not over here, right?
I
And
do
so
want to fight them over
acknowledge that
there,
if
but
there is going
only
to be a
when we
war,
have to.
we don't want the war in Cali, we don't want the war in Ohio, we don't
No,
want
we
the war
don't.
in Florida. Now, this
You're right.
Golden Dome system, this Golden Fleet system, this entire system is meant to counteract, as said in the announcements they put out, in the official announcements, our peer-to-peer competitors, not just rogue states, not just like the random missile launch from Mexico. And so if that's the purpose, is to make it so that Russia and China can't attack us, how is this money better spent in these systems that, again, we've talked about the problems with actually achieving these goals versus $150 billion that directly degraded Russia's ability to invade any country, to take any military action, to do anything against not only America's interests at home, but America's interests abroad. So if that's the goal of this, why is the money better spent in something that we all agree it can't achieve?
Well, so I don't know if it actually can achieve that. One of the deals with the Venezuelan invasion that a lot of people aren't really talking about, the fact that there was Chinese diplomatic team down there the night that the invasion and the ultimate kidnapping of Nicolas Maduro happened. Why were they there? Well, it could be that they were talking about installing a ballistic system that could reach the Panama Canal from Venezuela.
That's a big.
There is a big if. There is a big if there.
Yeah, I mean, but
Is it the biggest if we've ever heard?
But hold on. There's more to it. Okay, the way I connect these lines is the companies that actually controlled the entrance and exit of both sides of the Panama Canal happen to both be Chinese, and that's why Donald Trump came out and said, "We'll take back the Panama Canal." And amazingly enough, BlackRock happened to acquire those properties immediately, still remaining control under the Panamanians, but the entrance and exits of them are now controlled under U.S. companies. Okay,
Marky, do you know why that's important?
It's about national security and everything else. And yeah, the Chinese
they don't want
that canal to the U.S. Navy.
They're trying to reduce the They're trying to reduce the potential for someone to sink a ship in one of the locks of the Panama Canal, blow the bottom out of it.
I understand where like non-smoker and I was against the capture of Nicolas Maduro myself.
Which, by the way, wouldn't require an army. It wouldn't require a big deal. It would just require a bunch of idiots that get together and say, hey, you know what we can really do for our nation that'll be awesome, and we'll be heroes. We'll be heroes to the Bolivian empire that doesn't fucking exist, but we can blow up a boat in the middle of the Panama Canal and stop traffic through it for weeks while they fuck that shit up.
And now the Navy and now the U.S. Navy to transfer from the Atlantic to the Pacific Fleet areas, it's going to take them, instead of 4 hours to go through the canal, it's now going to take them a week and a half to traverse around South America.
Just tactical.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a huge. Can I just establish this quick and then I'll let Dylan go? It is a massive assumption, reach, whatever you want to call it, that Chinese diplomats who, by the way, China's relationship with Venezuela is pretty beneficial to China in one simple way. Venezuela, which is an extremely poor country, basically they give China extremely cheap oil in return for loans, which the Chinese know that they can't pay them back. And then a bunch of, they call them teapot refineries in China, little ones. They go and refine cheap Venezuelan crude as well. Okay, that's really the basis of the relationship. Venezuela falling for China,
as far as you know,
it hurts them, but it's not devastating. So the idea that the Chinese were down there to plan to build a ballistic missile system, first of all, ridiculous on its face, and second of all, why would they be doing that when all eyes of the U.S. military are fixated on Venezuela?
Why is that ridiculous?
Building a missile why is it ridiculous there? Whenever we know they have their top of the line like air defense systems right there, like radars and stuff, and
they were Russian in Venezuela. The air defense systems were Russian.
Were they, or the Chinese?
Yeah, they were Russian.
Well, there's a mixture of Russian and Chinese. There's also Iranian drones that were being flown over there. They're all part of the BRICS. It's not just an economic deal. They also trade.
The Venezuelans probably couldn't even afford to purchase Chinese ballistic missile systems.
Before China became the dictator, Venezuela was one of the richest countries in the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah, but they're not right now. You're saying that a Chinese diplomat being down there is evidence that they may have been building a ballistic missile system?
Look, it's very simple. As a foreign superpower, you go to a poorer country, you allow us to place these here, we'll help you this way.
Dude, this is
we do it all the time. That's what
this is the American perspective. The Chinese don't arbitrarily build ballistic missile systems in other countries just for the fuck of it, just in case.
Why do you think they're colonizing?
If China wanted to build a ballistic missile system off of the Chinese mainland,
isn't there like some group
several
of
other
people in
options
China
than Venezuela, which is surrounded by a U.S. Navy blockade? It makes no fucking sense.
Let me get Dylan in here since he was waiting here. Go ahead, Dylan.
So I just look. The idea of China building a ballistic missile system in Venezuela is interesting, almost as if a modern Cuban Missile Crisis, except I guess you'd call it the Caracas Crisis. I think that rolls off the tongue good enough.
I like that. I like that.
It's something similar to, the fact that we had certain missiles set up in Turkey, which was a concern to the Soviets. I just don't. I find this unlikely. It's not impossible. I could see a Chinese game plan of, well, if they're going to threaten us at home, we need to threaten them at home. And I could see the logic being played out. But all of the problems that Non-Smoker brought up of monitoring. Right now, America has basically every intelligence eye on the planet operating in the country. The CIA openly operates in the country. We definitely have informants within the armed services. Trying to hide something like this from the United States would be exceptionally difficult. And if we did find it out, I'm pretty sure Donald Trump would be shouting about it from the rooftops. I'm pretty sure he would immediately declassify this report saying China's coming in Latin America. This justifies my Don Road doctrine completely 100%. This is a national security priority of the United States. Now, maybe this is true and Trump is keeping his mouth shut because he's always been one to be humble. But I think that there's a possibility that it's not true. And Sparky, I do want to say, you just talked at the start of the show about we don't want to fall for like the same type of Iraq lies. One of the things that Dick Cheney said is that we don't want the smoking gun to be a mushroom cloud. And if we're talking about ballistic missile systems that we don't even know if exist or if there were ever plans for, we don't want to treat that in the same way.
I'm just looking at the possibilities and connecting the dots with what we've seen over the past year of the Trump administration. I'm not stating by any means that they were planning on putting a ballistic missile system, but when you look at what was going on with the Panama Canal and now the connection with the Chinese connection with Venezuela and the BRICS nations, the selling of defense equipment to Venezuela,
Chinese
things like
Venezuela
that,
is
it
the
is
fact
a
that they have
possibility.
relations. That's the connection, is that they trade a lot of fuel.
He also captured him.
If I may,
like 4 hours beforehand, and captured him right after. I mean, clearly it's a message. But yeah, go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, Sparky, if I may, I don't think it's ridiculous at all. I disagree with Non-Smoker because it's not like they didn't do it in Turkmenistan when they went over and they took all that land away from, who are they again? Oh, the Uyghurs. Yeah, they go there, they put them in internment camps. Maybe you've heard of them.
Ah, dude.
And what they did is they said, hey, we want to build some fucking military bases here. Yeah. And they disagreed. And you know what they did? They did it fucking anyway. So they might do the same damn thing in Venezuela. Because you know why? Because it's a shit ton of money for all the fucking loans we made.
The difference is that's mainland China.
What is it look like?
You are correct.
If you recognize that as part of China or not, that's in Central Asia. Venezuela is in Latin America. There's a huge gulf between these two locations, and just transport. Well, the thing is, in those areas, in where the Uyghurs live, trying to hide a construction effort would be a lot easier in a surveillance state that you control. Trying to take a ballistic missile system, transport it across the Pacific Ocean, through either south of South America or through the Panama Canal, then into Venezuela, then set up that system, all without being spotted by the United States or having any cable intercepted by the United States, is a little bit more difficult.
It's tough.
Yeah, but it's not impossible.
But it's not impossible. I mean,
I didn't say it was impossible, but we don't invade countries based upon.
I'm just saying, you guys,
just the vague possibility of it.
Say that.
It's like I'm just saying that Sparky's not necessarily wrong.
Can we just
you hand wave Sparky's entire theory, and I'm like, no, there's potential for that to actually be the truth.
One question: why wouldn't have China have done this prior to the whole Trump naval blockade and all that if they were intent on doing this?
I don't have any idea about other political societies.
When you look at it,
Well, then stop talking about fucking China.
well, right now, China is working on building one of the largest navies in the world. In fact, they have more ships than the U.S. Navy currently. The only problem is they're still not a blue water navy. Okay, the deal is they will get there. Now, our strongest and most near peer competitor, which I actually don't believe the Chinese are a peer at this moment, are the Chinese. I think they are a bigger threat to America because we also depend on them for manufacturing and things like that. We saw during the COVID lockdowns, things that American companies paid for were confiscated by the Chi-Coms and held away from Americans, things like masks, things like that. What stops China from taking our money? Yes, we will use our cheap slave labor to build your widgets and whatnot, and not give it to you because we deem it necessary for our own personal defense. What Donald Trump is doing overall, as far as I see it, is he's trying to bring more manufacturing, more industry to America, make ourselves more self-sufficient. We have seen a lot of problems over the past 15, 20 years easily with the reduction of manufacturing in America, little things like this. Like I said, a lot of military research leads to other advances in technology, such as medical and things like that. If we actually started, and Dylan, you mentioned relying on the European shipbuilders because they are the best in the world, and you are absolutely right, they are the best in the world. However, we do have a law states that we cannot assemble military equipment in foreign lands because of, even if they are allies, there are still classifications that are, it's called non-foreign, where no foreign individuals can even have knowledge of the stuff. When I worked at units where we had Canadians flying with us, when I worked with the AWACS, there was intelligence briefings that our Canadian people who were going to be flying in the same mission could not even attend because they didn't have the proper clearance because they were foreign nationals. So when you look at defense industries and things like that, like the KC-46, America's new premier tanker that they have built that is garbage, like 90% of the parts are actually currently manufactured in China. However, because it is assembled in America, it's considered legal. So these are the kind of games you got to play when you're talking about the defense industry. Just to throw that out there for you.
I'm gonna try to trigger a little bit of. I'm sorry. I'm so used to calling you Sparky. What's your new name?
You're fine, Jason, man.
Pax Romana.
Jason,
what was it?
Just call Vox Populi. Vox Populi 1788 is,
of course.
Yeah, voice of the people. I like it.
Mother's maiden name?
Yeah, you know. But no, I'm Jason, man. You've
okay.
known me as Jason
So,
for a while.
I'm going to use a word. I mean, I don't want to trigger your PTSD too much, but the Constellation series of ships is one example of American defense procurement disaster, where we were supposed to build about like 20 ships. We're still in the process of building 2. It was supposed to cost about $1.1 billion, and now both of the ships we're going to actually end up building are going to cost about $25 billion each if you scale up the whole program. And the fact that we're not that's all it ended up in doing is producing 2 ships when it should have produced 20.
And that is because the U.S. Navy tries to put too much equipment on a one ship. That's the problem we're seeing with the Arleigh Burke class ship.
What's interesting about that program, though, Sparky, is that original base design was a European design. We actually took something over from Europe. We brought it over, and then we started putting on stuff towards our own ends. Of course, the the vertical launch systems and everything else you would expect in a modern system, but we added other things, and then our process was tremendously slow. If what you're saying about China is true, Sparky, that we're truly in a naval race, that they're building ships which is true, at a rate that's much faster than us.
Yes, very much so.
We're going to have to work with the Europeans on this, whether it's just in R&D, whether it is in finding a way to make it legal for us to construct it on the European continent, or getting European laborers to come over and work in the United States and building ships in this country. If we're talking about building 90% of our ship in China before bringing it over here, it's much better for 90% of the ship to be built in Europe before bringing it over here, especially if the main threat that's being prepared against is the Chinese. The problem is that our administration is openly hostile towards European defense industry right now, and Europeans are currently considering other options, whether it has to do with Greenland. I mean, the topic of Ukraine, of course, keeps coming up, but the topic of Greenland is a real sore spot for this alliance right now. And I think we could end up weakening our defense cooperation because they're worried about being caught on the hook with a country that they think that their defense interests are splitting with them. They're no longer aligned with them.
Yeah. So when it comes to things like Greenland, I don't really support the rhetoric coming out of the Trump administration regarding Greenland.
Did you hear the $100,000 payments they would have make to Greenlanders to convince them to be Americans?
Yeah, that just sounds ridiculous.
Unironically, I am significantly more okay with every Greenlander getting $100K and us getting that fucking land than us being on a welfare program.
Look, I can see the strategic. I see the strategic value.
Diplomacy at work.
Strategic value of Greenland, and I'm the guy on the panel that has made the joke, "Make North America America for once." It's really not a joke. It is my vision for American supremacy. One country, one continent. Let's fucking go. But the reality of it is, the rhetoric coming out of the Trump administration regarding Greenland is too hostile, and Non-Smoker would probably like this. It is not diplomatic. Now, Non-Smoker earlier was talking about engaging in more diplomacy. One of the questions that I have for him specifically would be, what does that look like?
Wait, you're
After that,
asking
I'm going
me?
to come back to something else said. Yeah.
Sorry, you're asking me?
Yes. Yeah.
What are you asking me?
You came out with the statement that America needs to engage in less militarism and more diplomacy.
Right.
I'm not against more diplomacy. I want to know what that looks like. What is the Non-Smoker prescription for American
it's totally impractical question for me to resolve every diplomatic issue. Of course I don't have the answer. But what I can suggest is not going down the current route, right? And the current route, it's all laid out in the national security strategy. I mean, Dylan kind of pointed this out, and to be honest, I don't know enough about European shipbuilding to say whether or not we should work with the Europeans or not. Let me just take him at his word, right? We, for example, it's not just Greenland. If you look at the national security strategy, it basically excoriates Europe, European leadership, and it's basically a pretense for us to gradually pivot our way away from NATO, right? And I think there are many people within the Trump administration that look at NATO as a big money sink. We should get out of there, leave the Europeans to fend for themselves. Honestly, I have my own issues with this idea of this Russia that's trying to take over the world. I don't really believe in that. At the same time, does it make sense for us to turn away from our European allies completely? It sounds like a bad idea, right? I think you could have a diplomatic dialogue with Russia and continue supporting Europe. That's one example. I think
fair enough.
I do want, for the record, though, you can also bomb the Russians and have a diplomatic relationship with the Europeans as well.
All right. Well, that's a terrible idea. But look, so going into China, right?
Bomb everybody.
Engaging in a trade war with China is a ridiculous idea. And, especially with no real concrete plan to build up America's industrial base and bring manufacturing back here, we're basically just cutting off our nose to spite our face and then pussying out every single time, straining diplomatic relations with really our only true rival, I would say, economically anyway. In the Middle East, our complete allegiance to Israel, just unquestionably allowing them to expand at will, act with impunity in Lebanon, Syria, Gaza. It's been, I would argue, catastrophic in the short term in the Middle East. Now, some of you guys probably disagree with me there, but I think that establishing this hostile relationship with Iran has been terrible. Ever since the moment that we ripped up the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal, or the American participation in it, that's accelerated problems in the Middle East. I think that the route we're going is bad. Let me just put it that way. And I think that there's probably more practical solutions to all of this stuff than we realize. But the problem is many people view the United States government as a giant money siphoning project where they just can redirect these trillions of dollars into, their friends' pockets, right? And I know that sounds very vulgar and very unrefined, and it's not a deep analysis, but look at the money, follow the money. Where are all
these military contracts going to? It's these, tech companies and weapons manufacturers who supported the Trump administration, supported Trump coming around the second time. It's not that complicated. I'm just against cronyism, and I would have thought right-wingers, small government right-wingers would be with me on that, and you guys aren't. It makes no fucking sense.
I don't actually. Go ahead.
I want to come back to something y'all said just a little bit ago, and I think we can argue about whether this will actually make cronyism or not. So we just talked about maybe them putting ballistic missile system in Venezuela. Well, I just did a little research right now, and Venezuela is 763 miles to Panama. Texas is 773 miles or 778 miles. So when I'm looking at this going, oh, okay, it's less than the size of Texas. I'm pretty sure that they wouldn't build a ballistic missile system. What they would do is they would just go get they'd give the weapons to the cartel, or they would have Hezbollah, which we know is there, and then they would go build the weapons there, and then they would launch it. Like, that's what they do. I'm pretty sure I could build a rocket that could hit a target 800 miles away, and I don't have any kind of...
That's a bold assertion.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
I would hit it. Maybe later the football field.
Don't run on
You can do that, by the way.
Have you ever considered that it doesn't benefit China to hit America with a ballistic missile, and that's why they would never do that?
But what would help China is if a cartel accidentally decided they were going to blow up the Panama Canal, and then they're going to become the global.
How would that benefit China? They still direct trade through there.
They don't put that much there. I think they're less
Or
than 1% of
the potential to open up trade in the future when Trump is out of the White House.
Yeah, but they haven't done that in the last 100 years.
China's trying to increase its foothold in Latin America. Why would they do something to engage in any kind of like a militaristic action to help Venezuela do what? Kill a few Americans? Or it's like China. Listen, guys, I know China, you want to talk Uyghurs, Taiwan, whatever. You guys think they're slave society, all this crazy shit. They're a very pragmatic country when it comes to a lot of diplomatic things. That's why they don't engage in foreign wars. And I'm not saying that they're perfect. And China
agree with
China's tendencies and all of that kind of stuff. I agree with that. But China's not invading other countries. They're not developing ballistic missile systems to strike America. This is fucking insane.
When was China's last war? Wasn't it about like 50 years ago, right? Their last war that they participated in? Something around there, like 50, 60 years ago or so. Yeah. Well, my question to you, I know you guys
really
was that an own, dude? I mean, you're just building my case for me.
Hold on.
Well, hold on. I'm not debating with you. Just I'm asking a question here. Okay, calm down, man. I know. Chill out. No, but I was going to say, when it comes to China, their last war was around like 50, 60 years ago or so. I was going to say, you mentioned earlier, you were talking about the Navy fleet of China. Do you believe China actually has a better Navy than the United States?
I would yield to the experts who say they don't.
That they don't. Okay. I thought you were the one that said it. I think somebody else then said that.
No, I don't think anybody said they have better.
No, I think someone earlier said that China's building more ships than the United States. That's the
they are building more ships. That's okay. But they're bad. They're not particularly good ships. So I'm actually going to support something that non-smoker is saying here. I don't think so. One of the things about America is that we need the boogeyman. Our politicians require a boogeyman for the populace to get behind and rail behind and donate money and do all of the things and elect politicians to do different things. And right now, China's the boogeyman, right? I agree with him on that. My wife's Chinese, and I've been to China. I own property there. I really don't want to see it bombed, so please hold off until I sell it. And just, saying. But
your wife's the boogeyman in the relationship, Grid?
No.
He's Chinese.
I sent you maybe I didn't. Anyway, at the end of the day, I don't disagree that it's probably factually accurate that China is not attempting to currently build a missile system in Venezuela. However, the reality is that there is a version where that could happen. That is something that could happen. And as a part of national security, there is some level of, there's some people out there right now at the CIA who are like, yeah, they probably did that. or so, you know, they're far more paranoid than me, far more paranoid than any of us sitting here. And that's what they get paid to do. And that's okay. I don't mind that. I'm not saying that Sparky's right. I just said what Sparky proposed is possible. I'm not going to hand wave it out of existence, right? Like, it is entirely possible that there are bad actors that want to build a missile base.
You're losing
and it doesn't
me. You're
have to be the Chinese. It could be some other group. And just because the Chinese diplomats were there the day before, it could be completely irrelevant. I'm just not. And I actually agree. Sorry.
Listen, Trump. Do you really think Trump's that settled? Oh yeah, it just happened to be there. Come on, man. Like.
I don't, all I know is that
I think actually
he did it on the same day the Chinese met them.
They did months of logistical planning on this, and they struck at the best possible time. And I think it's entirely possible that just so happened to be when Chinese diplomats were there.
I could say that.
In fact, I could be mistaken. I think I read that they actually had to delay the attack for like a week because of weather conditions, right? Mm-hmm. So it could, you know what I mean? Like, it's not, if you wanted to say, here's a good conspiracy that makes sense, it's to send a subtle message to the Chinese. That I could buy.
Or at least to the world.
I do agree with that.
Chinese are planning to build a missile system. Come on.
This seems much more related to Trump's declaration. I mean, you can look at the national security strategy, and a lot of times you shouldn't take too much from it, because usually a national security strategy is just, here is a big wish list of things that I like. But in this one, it's pretty clear that the United States essentially is reasserting the Monroe Doctrine in an aggressive manner, because the president cares about undocumented immigration and stopping it completely, and being able to control foreign capitals helps you control the flow of people. And also drug smuggling. But that's not it, as the president has made clear with the oil in Venezuela, as Venezuela holds some of the largest oil reserves in the world, right next to Guyana, which then makes even of a larger amount. And Venezuela did have expansionist claims on Guyana and was talking about them as of recent.
And actually, I'm glad you brought that back up. I want to go back to this with the oil thing. I meant to bring this up earlier when y'all were talking about it, but I am almost, I know for me, I'm kind of an imperialist when it comes to America, but when I'm sitting here hearing these things, I find it refreshing that they're just saying it's for the oil, as opposed to, like, I grew up in the Bush era where he's like, yeah, we're going to bring democracy. And then, they're over there like, oh, yeah, we got the oil kickbacks. Like, I kind of like it that he's like, I'm taking your shit.
Looks like they need a little democracy.
Is it refreshing or is it scary? Is it, because the thing is,
I
understand that I like the fact that before, people would use other things as a smokescreen around what they're really interested in. But that didn't change here, did it? I mean, Donald Trump talking about this was about drug smuggling into the United States. No, it wasn't. It didn't really have anything to do with drug smuggling, but it was used as a smokescreen for other interests that the president of the United States had to assert in Venezuela. So the general calculation hasn't changed. It's just that they've changed the smokescreen from democracy to drug smuggling. That's it.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Dylan. Actually, I do believe it's about the oil. However, if we go into the midterms, we actually win the midterms. And if Donald Trump decides to go into Mexico and take out the cartel the way he actually promised, that would be more so about the drugs, since I believe Mexico controls around 17% of the drugs. Yeah,
because the routes
I would agree with that. I would agree with that, but I do believe that because Trump did run on that, and he did cast them as terrorist organization. So if he does go into these next couple years, and he does go into Mexico to take out the drug cartels, which I think the Mexican government's going to have a problem with that. I think that's also a big component there. But he is using the drugs, let's be honest, to get the oil. But I think it kills two things as a message towards the drug. The drug cartels over there in Mexico, and I hope he does it there. But and I think would you be in agreement with that?
What scares me, though, isn't just the reason it scares me is I do want a president of the United States that cares about democracy when deciding the future of 35, 45, or however many millions of people. Because right now it seems like the president of the United States is perfectly willing to work with the Venezuelan vice president, who, if they are saying they're illegitimate, Maduro, she's as illegitimate as Maduro. Maduro's son was there swearing her into the office. And there is no care about the future of the Venezuelan people.
Okay, well, at the same time, he doesn't, I don't know.
Purely just about the interests of the resources and the other things related to our interests in the region. Nothing to do with the people.
I want to
kind of agree with Dylan here because it was a complete reversal. Trump said, I won't work with her. I don't, that's not acceptable to put her in. And then he kind of reversed on that and recanted and said, oh yeah, she's fine.
Yeah, but also like,
let me just
said
say
he
one
wouldn't
other
put
thing.
Machado in.
Turn loose again. But I just read earlier today, the new conspiracy is that yes, oil is the big one, but the second reason, and the reason why you made them a cartel, is because Venezuela allegedly has double the amount of crypto stashed that we do, and so they would get this and they want to add it to our crypto reserves. That's and they can do this because it's under the president, and so if they charge him with crimes, they can seize it under U.S. law. Or do we think that has any merit to it, or is that
No.
Crypto is not a commodity, and anyone
I mean,
thinks it is an idiot.
I can lay out the 3 reasons if you give me a
Crypto
minute.
is not a commodity.
oil, and what's the other two?
So oil, obviously, right? And Dylan mentioned that they're keeping Delcy Rodriguez in power. There's a whole article in the Financial Times about this, that she was essentially the hand-chosen successor. She's someone who the Trump administration thinks is pragmatic, practical. She actually helped sustain Venezuela's oil industry under sanctions. They think that she's a great fit. Allegedly, she's willing to allow American oil companies back into the Orcono, I never know if I say it right, Orcono Basin. So the idea, is to bring American companies back in and start drilling. There's complications to that. We talked about that in the last panel. Venezuela's oil is very heavy. A lot of these American oil companies actually expect billions of dollars in compensation from being kicked out in the first place, but we'll see. That's part of it. The second part of it, you guys are kind of right. It is about alienating China. It's not that this is going to devastate China, but it's about slowly pushing China out of the continent, right? That's why we're also supporting right-wing populists, Javier Milei, et cetera, Bukele, right? We like this whole movement of pivoting away from China and Latin America because it's bringing our hemisphere closer to us. And then the last component, Dylan mentioned this also, it's in the national security strategy, it's immigration. We would love a deal with a new Venezuelan government where they will potentially agree to allow us to deport lots of Venezuelan immigrants into Venezuela. That's what it's about. It's those 3 things. And in all likelihood, Delcy Rodriguez, I highly recommend everybody read that article, Financial Times. I can't remember the title, but it's about Delcy Rodriguez.
Do you have the link to that?
I'll post it. But
yeah,
basically, the idea of this is that the Trump administration and Marco Rubio, they're banking on the fact that Delcy Rodriguez will work with them on all of those issues, especially the oil.
I was just going to say, I don't think the Trump administration really gives a shit who's in power as long as they work with them. So if Delcy Rodriguez actually does do that, then it would make sense to kind of work with the next one in power. At the end of the day, who are you going to put into that position before any type of regime change actually happens? Like, who would be a better fit for that? But, I would say the Trump administration doesn't really give a shit as long as they cooperate.
Nor should they.
Yeah, nor should they, to be honest.
So I do just want to throw out there that the Venezuelan military is like 100,000. There's like 100,000 men in the military. Then there's the
small
Vivos, which are like the militias that are on top of that. You've got like 130 something tanks. I don't remember how many aircraft, but about 34 ships, right? So what we did here is we didn't do regime change in the typical sense. We did presidential change. Regime change, the rest of the regime's still there.
I understand what you're saying.
We
Yeah,
went
of
in
course.
there and we changed up the whole government, and now in like 3 weeks there's going to be like a liberal democratic election and everything's going to be fantastic. It isn't going to be rigged. None of that's happening. I mean, even the Venezuelan vice president isn't following their own constitution where they're supposed to have elections within 30 days, and that's not happening.
And they rig them too, so it doesn't matter.
The incumbent, even though that man is never coming back. And so it seems like there's no progression in that direction. And so there's a complete abandonment by the administration, I think, of democratic achievement, because they look at that army, they looked at Chavismo is not dead, and they say, if we were to topple the entire regime, that could mean more people actually fleeing the country if it does not stabilize. If instead gangs, militia, the remnants of the armed forces started fighting over the ruins, that means more displacement of people, more refugees to the United States. And one of Trump's top issues, becomes a bigger issue in the negative. He's already losing polling on the immigration issue right now. You add a wave of humans coming to the United States on top of that, which, I mean, I remember the migrant convoys that were being put on TV during the Biden administration. Do you think the media will be so kind to Donald Trump and not put those migrant convoys as on top rating news? As Trump says, zero illegals into the United States. And then the camera shows people jumping over the fence, clearly not zero. He wants to avoid that situation. And so I think that might be a bigger priority than democracy in Venezuela to the Trump administration.
You think? Wait, hold on.
No, but I would also agree with that, though. Like, I prefer domestic policies of that over any of the foreign aspects as well. Like, I get you, during the Biden administration, when the caravans were coming in, the media totally downplayed that completely. Back to your point, if Donald Trump actually goes about it when it comes to, immigration, and we do have these people coming in, I would say he's not going to get the same love from the media as well. So I would say that. But Gibbs, I'm sorry I interrupted you. I just wanted to say that real quick.
I was just going to say, I almost might think it might be the opposite. Say this, now I agree with your assessment of like leaving the leadership in charge, but pure hypothetical, let's just say it falls into chaos and a giant migrant convoy of like, I don't know, 1 million people starts coming up. I almost think that if they got to the border and then the border was just like completely shut, Trump would be like, I did it. Like that almost might be a win.
Yeah, but Gibbs,
like,
what if it isn't? Yeah, what if the entirety of the U.S. border isn't as closed down as Donald Trump wants necessarily think, or is being implied? Because a lot of times it's about the aesthetic. It's about the image you send. If people think it's tough to get to the United States, then maybe they don't try. If they're put in a position where they have no option because they think if they stay back at home, they're going to get torn apart by machine guns or bombs or the Civil War, or they have no food, and then they go, and then they find, hey, there's a hole there, there's a hole there, there's a hole there, and footage of that gets out. It gets shared on Telegram, which is how that shit usually gets spread around.
Yeah, it's a little bit risky.
Then it's a little different.
Yeah.
Well,
Greg, you look like you were saying something.
I was just in response to non-smoker and Dylan. The other day, I was actually joking that Trump was actually going to annex Venezuela and make it American soil so that we didn't have to deport anybody. We could legally just relocate illegal immigrants to America white.
You mean like blue states?
Look, I will actually state this. I'm actually glad the fact that we're not forcing Western democracy on Venezuela. We are allowing them some sovereignty in the way that they govern themselves. I don't like the choice of allowing this the VP to take control. But hey, also I don't want to tell other people, other countries, other cultures how to live. It hasn't worked for multiple decades. We tried doing it in the Middle East, didn't work out all so well. The only place everyone points to is Germany, South Korea, and Japan. But those were cultures that were close enough to be more amicable to these ideals, where doing it over in the Middle East, where they're still in the Stone Age and a lot of things, and mostly retarded due to inbreeding. It's unacceptable. Okay, nice. Democracy is not compatible with their culture, and in a lot of the South American cultures, democracy is not necessarily compatible with their culture either, and we should not force those ideals onto people and allow them the sovereignty.
We're just going to let that one go, I guess.
I gotta say, Venezuela was a democracy until 2002. Right after after the attempted coup against Hugo Chavez, and then they tried to the coups tried to abolish the legislative branch, so that the coup failed because the public didn't support it because they didn't want that. After that, Hugo Chavez then tightened his grip on power, and democracy past that point in Venezuela basically faded away. Right, there is a history of democratic tradition in Venezuela. There are people alive today in Venezuela who have had democracy. The idea that this just like an idea that's just too difficult for them to comprehend. They're just a little slow. And they just don't get it. No, that's not true. There's a history of democratic tradition in Venezuela.
Latin America is closer than Japan and South Korea.
South America.
There's functioning democracies all over Latin America.
South America and the Hispanic community has been pushing more towards socialism over the past 30 or 40 years than any other group in the world.
How do you explain the right-wing
you should be happy about that.
In Latin America? How do you explain the right-wing population?
Because in some of those countries, they've rejected it.
Why would I explain it?
They've rejected
some of those countries. What?
I mean, where is the pink wave even left in Latin America? I mean, you've got Cuba, which has been like that for forever. You have Venezuela, which is actively in crisis. I mean, Cuba's kind of in crisis too. And then you've got Lula in Brazil, who isn't exactly Fidel Castro. I mean, like, what else? Who else? Where's this gigantic communistic wave in Latin America?
I'm just saying we should determine how to run their
What
country.
about in
How bad is
Chile?
that?
They elected Jose Antonio Cast. You know, there's like memes about him being the new Pinochet. It's like, dude, it's in your
Literally a supporter of
imagination.
Pinochet.
Yeah, it's in your imagination that Latin America is this like haven for socialism. If anything, it's quite the opposite. It's pushing in the right-wing direction. Now, it may be an authoritarian right-wing direction.
Hold on.
But it is a right-wing direction.
I kind of disagree with y'all on this take. I mean, I think that they're like y'all are both right and you're both wrong, right? Like all of South America, especially South America, like since like Bolivar back in the day, they've always had some left-leaning slant. Oh my God, I'm zooming in. Slants to them, right?
I love that
Like,
thing.
yeah, it hates me though. But anyway, they always have some. But they believe in like some of these things like social welfare. They like have a lot of like sort of things like that. And I think that's
Well,
what a
most
lot
of the
like,
world
Americans-
does, dude.
Sure, but I think like Americans in general think when they hear that they go, liberals, and then like are lefties, commies.
But that's a problem with America. That's a problem with America.
And they do have some support during the Cold War where they had like the communistas fighting. I think a lot of countries had that. But what really like I think like helps y'all stay on the other side here is that the cartels killed all the commies, and then the commies are dying off. Like if there's any left, it's Cuba. I mean that's really it. And like I mean Colombia used to have a big communist group, and now the cartels killed all those guys. So I don't know that the commies really are a threat in South America anymore. Like
By the way,
I don't know.
I do want to respond to one other thing that Aircraft Sparky said about, we're allowing them a little bit of sovereignty. You either have sovereignty, or you don't really have sovereignty. That's kind of how it
I'll
works.
agree
Because
with
if
that.
we decide we don't like your president because of oil, but it's not, it doesn't have to do with this issue. That's not saying you still have sovereignty over this issue. You have sovereignty on that issue until we would have decided that we didn't care about your sovereignty on that issue. We're allowing them sovereignty on issue. We don't care about the bus schedule in Caracas.
Yeah, but isn't that how like the entire world works, though, Dylan?
What people's laws on gay marriage. None of that matters to us. We care about the things that are of interest to us, and those are the issues of sovereignty that tend to matter. Nobody's worried that China's going to come here and tell us how to run our bus schedule. People talk about like China buying up farms and stuff. There's issues of sovereignty that matter, and there's issues of sovereignty. But it's still sovereignty. There's no sovereignty if you go in and you do this, Sparky. It's not. We didn't allow them any sovereignty.
Well, I didn't say allow them some sovereignty. Yes, I honestly, the
This is no
superpower in
sovereignty.
that hemisphere. Okay, cool.
Especially if we also
in the
say that the government's
hemisphere,
illegitimate.
the superpower in the hemisphere determines what they allow in their neighborhood. That's just
Can
how
I
the
ask-
world
can I
works.
ask you a
Welcome
question
to
on that point?
geopolitics.
Can I ask you a question on that point?
Sure.
So, okay, let's put Russia aside for a second.
Okay.
Would you say that China is the real superpower in Asia?
I would state that China is the de facto
Yeah, they are, dude.
superpower. Yes.
Unquestioned, yeah. Okay, so based on your logic, is it okay for China to take Taiwan?
I mean, if they can do it, I actually don't support us defending Taiwan. So,
Okay, great.
yeah.
So we agree, but let me pretend we don't, just for the sake of
I'm here
argument.
too if you
So
want.
do you see why that might potentially create a problem, right, for the world, right? Where now you're encouraging great powers to act with impunity and just absorb all the territory they possibly can.
I hate to break this to you, but that's been the U.S. foreign policy for at least 50 or 60 years.
No,
we have
trust
been the
me,
people
I'm aware of that.
operating without impunity. So
What I'm suggesting is that that's created scenarios like what you're seeing with Russia in Eastern Europe, right? And China, to this point, hasn't demonstrated that they're committed to an aggressive policy like that. But a lot of people are concerned about Taiwan.
I'm
Now,
pretty sure
here's
that
an
Taiwan
interesting
has
twist to
something to say
this.
about
So
that.
if you're okay with that, shouldn't then we cut down the size of our Navy, since a majority of
No.
its presence could be used to justify defending
no, because
Taiwan?
I want a Navy capable of defending all U.S. coastlines simultaneously.
Don't you think that a big motivation for us building a massive fucking Navy is to set up some sort of, like, I don't know, coercive measure towards China and Taiwan to not encroach on Taiwanese sovereignty? That's kind of the idea.
Well, that is actually part of the strategy of why they want to build up a bigger fleet. However, that is not the motivations that have me supporting the idea. My deal is to be able to project our power when needed abroad and still be able to defend the homeland.
Why would we need to project our power abroad if we're just staying within our own hemisphere? Do you mean just project our power within our own hemisphere?
Well, I mean, it's kind of a big world, buddy, and in our hemisphere, for us to project power within our hemisphere, we do need ships to be able to go abroad and do that. That would be going quote unquote overseas and still have a sizable defensive force for the homeland.
Right. I guess what I'm suggesting is what you're proposing here, probably without realizing it, is a scenario where great powers have expansionist policies and they invest more and more and more into defense. And in the process, they inevitably reach a point where their encroachments approach one another. And then there is an all-out conflict, which is something I oppose, and I would think you oppose too.
Already happening. We see that going on currently in the continent of Africa. We also see that happening.
Okay, so just in the sake of Taiwan, China hasn't taken Taiwan yet.
No, they haven't, but they've also surrounded the island, performed naval blockades, done air superiority deals.
All of
everything that's taking.
All right.
Which would imply a hesitation in taking it.
The reason for that is
hold on.
The reason for that is
Taiwanese military ships.
Yes, exactly.
Taiwan and China.
All of the Taiwanese military ships are captained by Chinese captains. They're all part of the Chinese military.
And honestly, why China hasn't acted on Taiwan is a simple logistical issue of how are they going to get the troops across Dylan, you're a little bit more familiar with the geography. Yellow Sea, is it? Or across that strait?
It is, of course, the South China Sea, as it is referred to.
Okay. Okay, yeah, thank you. Being able to get their troops over, yeah, whatever. They eat dogs and cats. Who cares? More racist tropes. No, at the end of it all, right now, what is actually stopping China is the inability to actually land their soldiers on the beaches, and there's also the threat of U.S. attack subs in the area at any time.
Sanctions, economic sanctions.
Yeah, there's all kinds of things, but legitimately at this point, China does not have the logistical capability to support an invasion, and I believe that's the only reason why they haven't done it.
I'm shocked that non-smoker Sparky and I mostly agree that we don't really care about Taiwan being invaded, and yet Dylan is like, hell no.
Look, Dylan.
I think that's very funny.
I support Taiwan.
Jake, you like Taiwan or you don't like Taiwan, Jake?
I'm not a big fan, but they do have they do have resources that I would like the United States to bring back over there.
That wants to defend Taiwan. Okay.
No, I'm here with
I'll
you.
take that
Neocons are not your friend.
Yeah. So I'm kind of fine with that, to be honest.
I have to ask, because I consider myself at root a non-interventionist. I understand that we have to work out in the world and all of that, and there are things that I don't like about the way things are currently, but I'm always seeking to reduce the footprint that we put out on the world. And that's why I'm actually a fan of the Golden Dome, because fuck everybody else, as long as they can't bomb us, I don't care. But at the end of the day, it sounds like we've got it sounds like non-smoker is a non-interventionist. He doesn't want to be out there, wreaking havoc in the world, which is shocking. And Sparky goes both ways on that. Jake, have you and I had the non-interventionist?
No, we haven't.
Okay. Well, we'll get to it. And but my buddy Dylan wants the U.S. Cudgel swung with impunity throughout the world.
But
Okay.
I can justify my worldview for a bit for an audience of my peers.
I'm just curious. I'm just really curious because, while I don't agree, I don't agree with helping Ukraine. I don't agree with helping some of these other things. I understand that there's arguments to be made for stabilizing a region, but my personal outlook on it is we suck at it. Like the entire reason that we've been fucked up in the desert for 70 plus years is that we thought we were stabilizing the region by assassinating the ruler of Iran.
That's if you think our goal was actually to stabilize the region.
No, it was also. It goes back to the oil, Gibbs.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's all
Yeah.
meant to
Right, yeah.
stabilize. We
If it was about the oil, we would have taken the oil. We never took the oil. It was about us. No, it was about us trying to set up puppet governments that would sell us the oil cheaper.
And
so
punish our enemies by selling it at
At a higher rate.
it
Yeah.
wasn't about the oil because we never took it.
Shit,
If we took it, it would have been a different animal. I more support Trump going, yeah, it's about the oil. We're going to take the oil.
It's ours now.
Well, at least he's being honest.
Now,
It
Americans
is ours
died
now.
for this. It's ours.
Okay, first,
Honestly, I would be more interventionist.
Respond to grid.
I would be more interventionist if we kept what we killed. If we went over to Iran and we beat the snot out of them and we made that America V2 or Sandbox Americana, totally cool with that. But what we do is we go send our men over to die. We spend billions of taxpayer dollars on equipment and operations cost. And what do we get out of it? We get slandered in the world press. Everybody thinks we're fucking assholes because we are, but that's okay. And we're constantly portrayed as the evil American because this is what we do, and we don't do it for anything that actually benefits the average American taxpayer, and that is the real problem at its core for me. I would honestly much rather spend 300 billion, trillion, whatever fucking dollars building a golden dome and telling the rest of the world to go fuck themselves than spend $1 billion defending Taiwan. That's just my personal opinion. I don't have to agree with me, but I'm
Or the Ukraine.
and I really want to hear Dylan's take because and I haven't heard his worldview, so I'm really.
Sure.
I'm sorry.
So earlier there was a confrontation between non-smoker and aircraft Sparky over exactly we're going to build up all these forces and then what are we going to use it for, right? And there was a confrontation about exactly would we use it to project power abroad, because I thought it was about defending at home. And for me, I think the world is so intertwined that these two things are the same. That if you were to talk about, for example, a blockade in the Suez Canal, that affects the United States. Right. Ever since this country's founding and we had to fight the Barbary pirates, we acknowledged that things abroad from the United States affect the United States. Right. So irrespective of any ideological motivation I could personally have for democracy abroad, I support democracy. I'm against dictatorship. That's a value that I hold, and I will continue to hold that while I'm standing here or in any country. Right. But irrespective of that, the world is intertwined with us. And as we have integrated our economies, integrated trade, Europe is the second biggest consumer market in the world. Losing the European consumer market would be a disaster for American manufacturers. So when we talk about building up American manufacturing, I do worry about our relationship with Europe because their consumers is what props up the American manufacturing that we still do have. And if we wanted to sell to a consumer market outside of our own, what's the second biggest? It's the Europeans. And so I value these relationships not out of just an ideological compulsion that I think democracy is good. I think Ukraine running their own affairs is good. I believe in nation state sovereignty. It's also, I think, of the interests of the United States. As for upholding international norms, I don't think it's just our job to do so. And sometimes I worry with this administration because when they talk about things like trade in the South China Sea and freedom of navigation, that's bipartisan. If you're Donald Trump, you're Hillary Clinton, you're Barack Obama, everybody believes in freedom of navigation. But trying to uphold that on our own is impossible. We have to uphold alliances to support that, or we're just going to make the taxpayer the number one upholder of international trade stability on their own, which isn't fair. That should be a global responsibility, not just an American responsibility. But accepting that as a global responsibility could also mean a decrease in American influence. And so there's a confrontation there. Right. But I believe that, yes, we do spend too much on defense spending. I think 1.5 trillion is a little too much for me. But that's why I think we should lean on our allies in Europe, lean on our allies in Japan and Asia, because that is going to work in defending Taiwan. Not us going out there and saying, let's have some boy from Georgia die on the shores of Taipei, but by working with the Koreans, the Japanese, and our allies to make a war not necessary in the first place, because I'd like to avoid one.
So, okay, so could I, and we're not trying to pick apart your worldview too bad here, but so would you then say that it's our right to demand NATO pay their fair share, to demand that South Korea start actually paying for the protection that we provide, and all of these things that we do that again, all of us pay for? Everyone here is an American taxpayer, I'm assuming.
Sure.
Don't dox yourself if you don't pay taxes. We all pay taxes. But so each one of us has a stake in the game, right? And this is why it really matters. It really matters when we start talking about this stuff, because while I support trade with Europe, absolutely, why would we not? It seems like unnecessarily the U.S. tends to pay for other countries' sovereign security. They wouldn't, in other words, they would not be a sovereign country without the money and protection from the United States. And I don't believe that that's the way the world should work. I think that that's wrong.
If this was a relationship where we're just throwing capital over the Atlantic, propping up Europe's defense, and then they enjoy the fruits of the labor, and that was it, then I think you would have a point. And I do think, again, this has been a bipartisan consensus, it's just Trump was very loud about it, that the Europeans should have spent more on their defense. I also think they need to start thinking as a bloc. And this might be a disagreement we find in here. Depending on the conservative, they might disagree. But I don't think Germany, when thinking about German defense, should just invest in factories in Germany. They should invest in the factories in the cheapest countries possible in Europe, where you can get the most runtime, produce the most munitions at the lowest possible cost for Europe-wide defense. That type of concentration with America's gigantic size is what allows us our concentration of power. If we allowed each state, Maryland, California, to run their own defense budgets, produce their own artillery shells, produce their own stuff, we wouldn't be able to concentrate our capabilities. That's something I want to work with the Europeans with. But if we say that our defense is our defense and their defense is their defense, then there's no reason for us to work together on research and development on the F-35 program or any of the other hundreds of weapon systems.
We'll sell F-35
technologies.
Dylan, you would
that we're
agree
working
that
together.
NATO...
There's no reason for us to work across the transatlantic for their defense with us against terrorism. There's no reason for the Five Eyes. This supports both of our defense capacity. It allowed Europe to come with us into Afghanistan. Many Europeans died. And it also allows us to prop up the trade, which allows us to be stable. European stability promotes American stability. European defense promotes American defense as much as American defense promotes European defense. And over 80 years, it's worked.
Yeah, Dylan, I don't know if you answered the question directly. I don't know if Grid's satisfied with that, but I want to ask you directly here. Do you believe the NATO countries should be putting in their own fair share of defense?
Yes, but I think that what we're talking about right now, the idea of, well, maybe they should be spending more money on maintaining American bases. I think the much more effective, if our goal is to make us as a unified political bloc have the most leverage possible, they should be spending their defenses or their defense budgets on building factories where it's most cost effective to build the most munitions as physically possible, because there's a munition shortage crisis. There's a propellant shortage crisis. There's a number of crises where I think this money is much more usefulness for our defense needs and their defense needs than just giving us a big fat check.
Okay. So I can actually agree with you on that point. One of the interesting things about European defense spending is currently one of the largest and richest countries in Europe, that would be Germany, is still unable to defend themselves. In fact, it is estimated 10 to 12 years before they could even hold up a single defense of their own country without excessive foreign intervention from the U.S. and the U.K. The U.K. currently cannot defend themselves either. In fact, all of Europe depends on the United States to be their security force at this point, and that is a problem. I fully agree with the idea of the European Union actually mobilizing their industrial base to build more factories to build propellant, artillery, and all these other things. You're absolutely on point there. I also want that for America, and I want to see America bolster their industrial base, because currently we depend on foreign countries to supply us with basic goods that we then take and we assemble into bigger pieces of military equipment. So what you're suggesting to happen domestically within Europe, I want to see in America. And yes, we can do that. We can trade as we trade a lot of defense systems amongst our allies and stuff. We can trade those things amongst ourselves. There's not a problem with that. I think Dylan, me and you we're real on point in that factor. Maybe not everything else, but in that factor at least.
I do want to say that our aid packages to Ukraine, a lot of people forget that part of that, like 150 billion, not the 300 billion made up number, but 150 billion number that actually was approved, much of that was for American manufacturers in the United States. Basically, all of the stuff that was sent over went to American businesses, and all of the expansion that happened of businesses were in the United States. Our artillery production is now larger because of Ukrainian aid. The reason, part of, a huge investment went into those production facilities. So our support for Europe did build up American defense capacity, just like our Lend-Lease programs to the British and to the Soviets before World War II helped build up American industry before we had to mass industrialize for the war.
It hasn't done it at the same scale as what we saw in World War II. Of course, we're talking about two different sizes of campaigns and things like that. So, of course, it's not going to be a one-for-one comparison. One thing that I will state is that the aid that has gone over to Ukraine has helped us rotate our stock of our munitions and stuff because, believe it or not, artillery shells do expire. Gunpowder goes bad. Missiles have to be refueled. They have to be maintained. We've sent a lot of PAC-2, PAC-3 missiles over to Ukraine for their air defense. Proving the effectivity of the Patriot system. In fact, I think we sent another 2 systems over there recently. Am I right about that, Dylan?
I don't know if another 2 systems were sent over there. I haven't heard.
All I know is that we can finally get. Go ahead.
Go ahead. You're fine.
I was going to say that all I know and all I care about is I can finally get 8208 XBR back in stock so I can reload my long range precision rounds. That's all I really.
You and your guns.
My gun?
I will say of those Patriots, by the way, our Patriots are much more accurate now. The data that the Ukrainians gathered from those Patriot defenses is the reason we know that Patriots can even knock out Russian hypersonic missiles because they performed in Ukraine and achieved that. Not to mention tons of intelligence trading when it comes to drones and information about one of our biggest peer-to-peer competitors, the Russians.
Yeah, I agree with. I think it's part of the reason why we're still friends with Israel is we get to see all this stuff in real time. I've had that debate many times now. But let's go to closings now. And we'll wrap this up in here. We'll get close to the end. Let's go to Jake first here this time. What do you got?
Your closing statements talking about?
Yeah, closing statements.
Okay, yeah.
Coming up.
Yeah. First off, I'd like to thank Dylan and Non-Smoker because I think I had a panel with Non-Smoker at one point. I think I don't think we were very friendly with each other. And every time we did interact, we weren't very friendly neither. But I would like to actually put him on the show, on my show anytime often, talk about communism, actually, because it seems like he has a passion for China and communism. And I'd like to have a conversation with him one of these days. I'll get your contact to Gibbs. I'll ask Gibbs for it. Dylan, you seem like a pretty smart guy as well. I don't think I've ever been on a panel with you, but I think I've seen you around here and there. So you're another pretty interesting person that I would like to speak to as well. With that being said, yeah, you guys can find me on Project VealPod on YouTube and Rumble, as well as JVAR11 on X and Instagram. That's my handles there. As far as the entire exchange here, I think I learned a lot. I think Dylan and Non-Smoker, and especially Jason, know a lot about the interworkings of ballistic missiles that I learned a lot about. So I was kind of sitting back and kind of absorbing a lot of this information. So really do appreciate the panel and the conversation here. That being said, I'll end my closing.
All right. Thank you so much. Let's go to Non-Smoker.
Oh, yeah. Hey, twitch.tv/non_smoker. Check out the struggle session every 2 weeks, Tuesday, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Time on WUSB Stony Brook. Also, check out my Substack, nonsmoker.substack.com. While we're plugging stuff, if you guys find me to be an informed person, I can appear much more informed in the written form. Anyway, this is always fun.
Thanks, Gibbs, for having me on. Thank you guys for joining me. Sorry if I was a little antagonistic there. I'm very passionate about the anti-war thing. I do want to say to everybody, especially in Dylan's audience right now, anybody who's of the left-leaning persuasion, that this is the best evidence I could possibly provide you that neocons are not your friends. And the idea that, you know, we go around the world interfering in all these countries to spread democracy, it's just not true. You know, Trump is the ultimate realization of American imperialism, but he's not the guy who started it, you know. And I would suggest to everybody here who is against a global conflict of apocalyptic proportions, which seems to be what some of you guys think we're heading to inevitably, if you're against that, maybe a change in approach could help us find a better outcome. Right? That's all I'm saying. So anyway, hit me up, anybody, if you want to have subsequent conversation. I'm totally open to it. Thanks for having me.
All right, thank you so much. I don't know, man. I think President Polk might have Trump beat, you know, with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, but, you know, pretty close imperialism. Well, let's go with Jason. Here you go.
Yes, I'm Jason of the channel Vox Populi 1788, formerly Aircraft Sparky. Look, I like to do these debates because I find the discussions interesting. I get to talk to interesting people. Dylan, actually someone who I'm a big fan of, the work he's doing over there in Ukraine, even though we don't agree on how to deal with the situation from a U.S. policy standard, I still enjoy the information he's given out. I've learned a lot from his documentaries and things like that. Yeah, look, when it comes down to American superiority when it comes to defense, I think that it is best that we have a large Navy able to defend Americans' homeland while still projecting power abroad when needed. I don't want to project the power all the time, but if it's needed, I want to have that tool in the toolkit. When it comes to things like the Golden Dome, if air defense scares you, that's a you problem. I like the idea of being able to intercept potential ballistic missiles launched at the North American continent, mainly because I don't want shit raining down on me. I believe Dylan's actually been around during a ballistic missile attack. That shit is fucking scary. Yeah, I'm sure he can tell you all about it. I myself have not witnessed it myself. I've only seen, you know, some small cruise missiles and some mortars, nothing of that magnitude. So yeah, I don't want that happening to America or Americans. I want America to be safe. I want Americans to feel very happy in their lives, and the way we do that is through security and economic prosperity. And if you want to tell me about how I'm an idiot or anything else, reach out to me. I'm more than willing to do these conversations. I find them to be fun and informative, learn different perspectives. Thank you for your time, and thanks for everyone for being here tonight.
All right, thank you so much. Mr. Burns.
So I've already made clear as to why I think the Golden Dome and the idea of a practical achievement of being able to stop atomic weapons from entering the United States is not a practical objective, and the goal should be to continue and maintain deterrence that has allowed mutually assured destruction to prevent an atomic war since 1945. And I think that is the standard that we should continue to uphold, and any investment in radar systems or detection systems, sensors that could be put in certain locations to detect it if it's from North Korea or here. This should be invested towards trying to stop an incidental launch, which is much more likely than a full-blown Chinese-Russian launch. It's just something decays, there's a mistake, somebody doesn't know what they're doing, there's a technical failure, human error, there's a million different things that could have led to an atomic launch. And during the Cold War, you can read a number of horror stories of close calls where the world really stood on the brink. So I would support that. And I would support dealing with certain rogue nation states. For example, building up a force that could deal with a North Korean launch. But trying to deal with a Chinese and Russian launch in scale, I think is not a practical achievement. I think the money is better spent otherwhere. As for the fleet and the Golden Fleet section of today's debate, I think the Europeans are still the best ship manufacturers in the world. We should try to work towards building up our defense relationship with the Europeans, defense cooperation and production, so that they can help produce the shells and the means that could support us if we got into a crisis, and themselves for the crisis that they're in now, as well as working them in ship manufacturing, because the Constellation class disaster can't keep repeating, or we're going to always be outpaced, and we're always going to produce less ships for a longer period of time at a much bigger cost. And there's no way to win from a defense economic standpoint if that's the situation we find ourselves in. As much as I would like to believe that Pete Hegseth and other people at the Pentagon have the situation under control, I am skeptic. And that's why I think we need to work with our allies to give ourselves the best chance to succeed. As for the general ideological conversation we had today, I want to just connect to that from Sparky's request that I talk about ballistic missiles for a moment. Yeah, I've been in multiple ballistic missile strikes. I don't remember how many. I've been in enough that I honestly don't remember. But what happens in a ballistic missile strike, if it makes impact, it depends on what it's carrying. If it's carrying a traditional warhead, then yes, it can destroy 1 to 2 buildings due to the size of the warhead, crush people in their homes, and they slowly suffocate and dust or get crushed, or that's usually the outcome. There's also thermobaric warheads that can literally burn the air around you, essentially burning you to death. And those have quite a large range due to the fact when it makes impact, it literally uses the air as fuel. And these weapons can produce a lot of terror. And as we just saw earlier today, the Oreshnik from Russia struck Lviv. Energy was knocked out, and the Oreshnik is a multiple reentry vehicle. So if you put 12 to 14 to 16 thermobaric warheads on just one Oreshnik, you're talking about a lot of damage, potentially hundreds upon hundreds of civilians in just one ballistic missile strike, right? It can do a tremendous amount of damage. And I think that type of barbarity between states should be prevented. I think it's better for everyone if we're trading with the Russians and we're trading with the Ukrainians instead of trying to prevent a revanchist, imperialist, and largely, I would say, morally deprived organization that is the Russian government from invading European states. And I think international norms that don't only check the Russians, but also check the United States and check the Chinese are the best way to establish a type of stability that will not only stop this type of barbarism in the modern age, or at least disincentivize that type of barbarism, but will also provide stability that will be better for everybody. It'd be better for everybody in trade. It would be better for everybody when it comes to interstate relations. And it would be better for everybody when it comes to resolving conflicts, because you could have intermediaries deal with the conflict rather than dead kids. Right? I'm not saying that this is an easy goal to achieve, and I'm not saying it should be the sole responsibility of the United States and United States taxpayers. What I am saying that an aspirational goal is better than endless chaos when we have the means to destroy the world. You give us enough chances, we will fuck up, and so we have to check ourselves.
All right, thank you so much. And last but not least, Grid. Also, why don't you go ahead and mention about tomorrow so I don't have to probe that.
I'll do the tomorrow thing at the end. First of all, I'm really happy to be on a panel with Smithers and Mr. Burns. That was awesome. Yes, Jake, you're Smithers. And that's awesome to be on a panel finally with Smithers and Mr. Burns. I like a lot of what has been said here. I don't agree with some of the methodology that it's meant by, but I agree with a lot of the actual wording. So one of the things when we look at this Golden Dome as a defensive measure, I can't see a downside to it. Shipbuilding, I mean, to be honest with you, and I probably should have said this during the actual debate, probably should just buy our ships from South Korea. Hyundai builds the best ships in the world, and they build more of them than anybody else in the world. So, maybe they can start paying their tab for our military, providing them with protection in ships. Who knows? I don't know. But at any rate, we had this was a far-ranging conversation. I like a lot of what was said. I'm actually kind of shocked that we found common ground with non-smoker on the non-interventionism and some other things. I actually stopped trolling him there for a while, so I was like, I'm really shocked at myself. But and I will even say Venezuela just one more time to trigger him. I do appreciate everyone coming out tonight. It was actually a really great discussion. I don't really have a lot to add. These guys covered pretty much the whole debate really well. From my point of view, I'm a non-interventionist. I don't believe we should be helping as much as we do. The problem is that politicians can't help themselves but to overspend and overpromise, and so we should stop that. As far as the other thing, tomorrow, guys, we will have a debate on Wick's channel, on Wick TV. It will be myself. Gibbs, are you still in? Gibbs is still in. And I'm having Tim Hale, who is the, he bills himself as the, what is it, the comedian J6er or something like that. And so he's a J6er who was actually in prison for 3 years, thanks to our wonderful government overreach there. And he will be joined by Enrique Tarrio, who some of you may recognize that name as the leader of the Proud Boys. And we will be debating Destiny and some dude named Dev on J6. What was the exact prompt again?
Yeah, who's the real insurrectionist? I think they're quoting the White House's.
Are Dems the real insurrectionist?
Anniversary post, yeah. So that'll be pretty good. I'm pretty excited. It was good stuff. So check out all this stuff tomorrow, and I'll check out all these other people's channels. Once again, I highly recommend Dylan's documentaries. I'm looking forward to the next one. They're very good stuff. On that note, we're going to raid my friend Honey Bunny. Thank you all, everybody, for being here.
Gibbs, real last thing, I swear. I'll let it go after this. Just one more thing. I just want to put this out here, right here. When Grid called me Smithers, I thought you were talking about Dylan for a second, but I guess it's me. But I just want to.
Burns, obviously.
No, dude, definitely non-smokers, Mr. Burns. Non-smoker, can you give me your best impression of excellent, please, before we leave off?
Excellent.
There you go.
That's not bad. That's not bad.
Not bad. Yeah.
Good.
Hey, had a great time, you guys.
Thank you all so much. Got it going.
Bye, everybody.
Have a good one, guys.
Can I have a question,
what's
Gibbs,
fun?
for you to ask Enrique Tarrio? Can you ask him if he thinks the person who planted the pipe bomb should also be included in the pardon? I'd be very interested in knowing the answer to that.
That's actually a good one. Text me that so I remember it.
Okay, you have a good one. See you later.
Actually, is
You too, Homo.
take care.
Have a good one, guys.